Good day everyone, Aubrey617 here, doing something a little different today. I got an idea to make a Sony Vegas Pro tips and tricks type video, showing you little tools and things I use a lot that you might not know about, things I didn't know about for a really long time. So I'm just gonna go through these really fast. Hopefully you'll have some understanding of how to use Sony Vegas to begin with. This isn't a tutorial on how to use Vegas. This isn't a tutorial on a specific effect or anything. It's more of just little things you might have missed. And hopefully this will help you out. I'll try to go fast, so if you know some of these, just keep watching. Hopefully at least a few of these things you won't know, and this will help you out. So the very first thing I'm going to talk about is this ability to close media when the program's inactive. So basically what this is actually a big problem with causing Vegas to crash. If you have Vegas crash a lot, this might be part of the problem. If you go into options, preferences, there's these options to close media files when not the active application, and the one below it, close audio blah blah. Both of those by default when you install Vegas, both of those are checked. Honestly, I wouldn't ever check those. Basically what that's doing, if you minimize Vegas, open up, internet and start going on the internet, it basically closes down all the media files in your project, and when you try to click back into Vegas, it tries to load them all back up. I guess to save power so you can surf the internet faster, but you shouldn't be surfing the internet and doing intensive things if you're using Vegas anyway. So I just uncheck those, because a lot of times when you return to Vegas, it'll actually cause it to crash when it's trying to load them all back up. So uncheck that. That's thing number one. Number two, deleting unused media. This is a really interesting thing. This is also kind of related. This is another thing that can actually prevent a lot of crashing. So let's say you're working on a project, you have all these different little media things you're using, and let's just say, let's start, so let me open up iTunes, and let's throw in some music, throw in some 2 Steps from Hell. And you just start throwing in music, and you're like, oh, this is cool, oh wait, no, I don't like this one, let's try this, oh, no, I'm not happy with this one, you just keep trying them, and eventually you find a song you like. Although you deleted all those other songs previously, they're actually all still being stored with, these are actually some of the songs I just threw in. They're actually still being stored in Vegas. So every time you load Vegas, even if the songs aren't there, you're still going to have to load all that music or videos and stuff. So there's actually this cool button right here called Remove All Unused Media. If you click it, you notice it just cleared up. Everything that wasn't in the timeline just gets removed. I kind of wish they'd just do that automatically. This actually can be really, really helpful. This was the reason I was able to finish War Attack in Arcadia. I had a corrupted media file, and I deleted it hoping it'd fix the problem, but it kept still having problems. Then when I did that, it cleared it out, and then it worked just fine. Next tool, ripple effect. This is something that's hilarious because I didn't know about this for about 4 years, and it was about halfway through ROTS before I noticed this, and I don't know how I ever lived without it. This thing up here, it's called the auto ripple. If you press that button, basically what it does is if I move something, it pulls everything afterwards, around. If I pull that way, if I pull this out, and I didn't even realize that existed. And this is so useful if you're, you put in you have a scene all edited out, then you throw in the dialogue, and the dialogue's too long, and you have to pull a clip out, but it screws up the whole scene. But now you can just pull that out, it fixes everything else. One thing I want to mention about it though is there's 3 different types. If you hit this drop down box, there's affected tracks, blah 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 blah. Basically the first one is, just as it says, it only messes with the track that you're moving. As you see that none of this audio is moving on those video tracks up there are moving. Honestly, I'd be careful though. I would pretty much always have it on everything, all tracks, markers, and regions, because if you don't, you're gonna start finding that your audio is not synchronized and stuff. And if you're wondering about the markers and regions, I have no example here. If I actually press V, I'll go into this a little bit. Let's say we have a part where the audio kind of fades out here. If I have it set to the everything, then if I were trimming this, another thing also, if you notice, I grabbed the beginning of the clip, pulled it forward. When I let go, it automatically just pops it into place. Oh, right now I have it set to. So if I set it to everything, now I pulled out. Notice it pulled everything over, including the little envelopes and everything. And if you're editing the end, pulling the end backwards, let go, it pulls everything forward. It's just really, really, really handy. I use this so much, but I'd make sure, I'd just pretty much always, I can't really think of a case where you'd need these other ones really. I'd pretty much always leave it right there. But now I'll turn it back, and make sure to turn it back off, otherwise you can really start messing things up. So the next thing I want to talk about that I actually figured out a little bit before that, and it's kind of related, let me turn off all these things, is this kind of lasso select button. Up here, this is your normal select button. Sometimes, I don't know if you've ever actually hit like a random key, and suddenly you notice like, oh, I can't click on anything, I can't do anything. Well, that's how to like switch between these different things. If you ever need to switch back, just click here. But basically the lasso select thing is basically, you know, like the things in like Photoshop or Microsoft Paint where you just, you know, you can select groups of things without having to use, you know, normally you'd click here and do like hold shift and kind of select in a row. But sometimes if you want to kind of select more of like a group, like a little chunk of audio, you can just kind of go whoop and select it, and then you go back to normal ones. Now you can move all that around. It's kind of useful. Hopefully you'll use it for something. Alright, next thing is the ignore event grouping button. This is another thing I use really heavily. I think I'll actually start with this part of it first. So let's say you have this little shot of, you know, Raptor walking along, and you wanna duplicate the layer, that way we can mask his sword. So if you just, you know, do Control C, you know, click on the layer above and do Control V and paste, you know, it pasted everything, including the audio track. Well, we don't really want that new audio track. So if you do ignore grouping, then do Control C, click on the video, do Control C, Control V. Now it only pasted just the video, which is what we want. Another application where this is really useful is with audio. So here I have a little scene where, you know, they're slashing, then they start running off, and they run off. But listen to the audio real quick. You hear that little cut where you hear the little leftover sound at the end of this one. Well, what we can do, you know, if you wanted to cut that sound out, it's like, oh, we have to cut everything forward. Actually, you can just do ignore grouping, pull this back, and then smoothen this out, like use a little of that one overlaying into this one, and now when you play it, it sounds very fluid. And the third application where you really want to use this thing is, let's say you actually have a really cool sound effect that appeared in game, and you let's say this little sword slash, like, oh, that was a really nice sword slash, and you want to use it as a sound effect. Well, if you do that, if you ignore the grouping, you can, you know, cut the little sound out, copy it. Now, you know, I have like this little sound effect of sword slashing. I can just throw that wherever I want. I use this to get like metal impact sounds sometimes. My CPU fan's running really loud right now. Okay, next tip is using the arrow keys. This is something hopefully you'll know. Oh, ignore all this. Okay, I was just kind of picking random clips out of my folder to throw into this project for this tutorial. So I got a lot of weird things. I just was literally playing around. I was just trying to create visual effects that made this run really slow. You notice how it's running really slow if I'm trying to like move through here. If I press play, I saw one frame that entire time. So one thing you can do, hopefully you know about this. If not, this should be really useful because I use this all the time. If you use your arrow keys, you can move one frame at a time. It's probably so intense if you don't even notice it here. If you're right here, you can just kind of see, you know, kind of moving through and going back the other way. And you can really use that to get it down. The reason I'm clicking twice every time it moves is because Halo Reach runs in 30 frames per second, and this project's in 60 frames per second. Normally, you just, you know, every time you click a mouse, it'd move. Next thing is fade types. This, like the arrow keys, this is probably something you should probably have known about, but maybe you don't. Maybe this will help out. So let's say you have like a little crossfade. Actually, let me back a little bit. Let's say we want to fade in the scene. By default, there's that little, you know, Bezier fade that kind of, you know, it kind of slowly works in and slowly fades off. If you actually right-click on it, you can actually choose which type you want. If you want maybe just like a linear one, or you want something to, you know, kind of slowly fade in and kind of finish up. And you can also do that on two-way fades. It gives you a big option of all these different ones you can use. I use this a decent amount. If you don't want it to get like kind of really muddy in the middle, you want it to kind of stay, I use that one a lot. Or just some kind of linear thing. And actually, my bad, I was actually supposed to have two audio clips here to show you. This actually works for audio as well. Let's say we have this and this. And you want to like fade out the audio. You know, you don't want the audio just to kind of fade off. So you want something, you know, like that, where it kind of, you know, kind of slowly fades off. Or maybe you have like a really loud crescendo that you want it to quickly kind of get quieter and then just kind of slowly trail out. So you can use those. Alright, the next thing is copying event attributes. So right here, let's see, oh, we need to turn these things off. Let's say I want to create a nighttime effect. So I, you know, lower the saturation a little bit to kind of clear up the colors. I make it pretty dark. Oh, this actually was color curves. I used the color curves to give it kind of this blue feeling, but then I added a third effect to bring back up some of the lightness and the bright whites so you can kind of see things again. And let's say this is your perfect special effects. You love this nighttime effect. It's your magnum opus of nighttime effects. And you want to use it on all these clips. And instead of, well, there's actually a few ways you can do this. One, the more reasonable way to do this is actually to just create a new video track and apply the effects onto the track. And then just anytime you want a nighttime scene, just, you know, pull it into the nighttime track, which is actually what I did in Middle Ground. Ever since Middle Ground, I've just used that in everything. I always have a different track for every type of effect. But let's say you only have about 3 clips and you don't want to make a whole new track. One thing you can do, if you go to a clip and either do Control-C or just edit copy. If you copy a clip and then you go to another clip, there's an option, if you right-click it, you can paste event attributes, and bam, it pastes basically everything, like all these effects. But be careful, it'll also paste if you had done something with, you know, like the cropping, it'll also paste that. But, you know, normally you don't mess too much with that stuff, so just copy it from one that's like that. And then, you know, you can just go through, like, oh, you just keep going through and, you know, pasting it, paste your nice nighttime effect you like. This next thing I'm going to talk about, I actually regret to announce that I couldn't actually find an example of this, which is weird because I noticed this happening so many times while editing rots, and I couldn't actually find a clip where it was showing it. But basically, if you're ever editing and you're getting, like, you're masking something really fine-tuned, you're just going, like, frame by frame masking, like I do all the time with the sword, and you notice it getting kind of weird and blurry. There's actually an option, if you right-click on the piece of media, go to Properties, you can do this thing called Disable Resample. For some reason, by default, everything's Smart Resampling, and Smart just means it looks stupid sometimes. And you can disable it, and sometimes it'll clear it up. Like, you'll even notice, like, as soon as you delete it, like, suddenly all this weird kind of ghosting clears up. I think what it's trying to do, it's trying to kind of smoothen things out, but often it just kind of looks blurry and gross. So usually, especially with the hoppage PVR, I notice that happens every so often. So you may want to disable that. And if you want to do it to a whole bunch, you don't want to have to keep, you know, right-click Properties, so you don't want to keep doing that. What you can actually do if you select a whole bunch, let's just select all these things. Oops, select all these clips. You can go up to, I believe it's under, let's see, Edit. Yeah, Edit, Switches. And you can just do Disable or Sample. Now all those will have been disabled. So usually you want to just, like, at the end of your project, just disable everything, unless you need resampling for anything. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to talk about, while this cute picture of a cat with his head stuck in bread, is markers. So you may have been noticing all these little orange things everywhere. Basically, just press M, boom, type whatever you want. You can create these little markers, and I find these so handy. I use these all the time once I figure out how to do that. You can use them to kind of tell yourself where scenes start. You can just put a little reminder, like, you know, like refilm this, or, oh, I can't even type, like refilm this, or maybe like, you know, special effects, as in like a reminder to tell you to do special effects. Basically, when I use it first at the beginning to kind of tell me where the scenes are, and then when I start getting near the end of a project, I'll start going through and just put a marker everywhere where there's a problem, and then I'll just go through and start, you know, being like, oh, there's a problem here, and then I'll just kind of fix all the problems until eventually you're done with the project. It's a good way to kind of work. Okay, back to this weird thing I did. I don't know where I'm getting this. I'm just playing around with effects. I was going kind of bored with effects. So, one thing that most people don't know Sony Vegas has is a RAM preview option. If you use After Effects, you'll know After Effects has a really nice RAM preview. Vegas's isn't so intuitive. It's not really, you don't really see what's going on, but it still has an option. So again, if I try to play this in full quality, you don't see anything at all. I saw a beginning frame and then just went to the end, because there's all these, I have 3 layers. I have the starburst effect on, which really slows things down. What you can do, if you highlight a little area, however much you want to RAM preview, and do Shift B, and just give it some time. You'll notice the little thingy is moving through the timeline on its own. I'm not doing that. It's just moving through kind of one frame at a time, rendering it to your RAM. And if you give it some time, it'll clean it all up. That way, now let's say, okay, that's good enough. I want to hit spacebar and see how it looks. Notice now the beginning of that, everything that I RAM previewed, it runs really smooth. So you can definitely use that to, if you're working on an effect, and you can use these arrow keys to kind of work through slowly. But if you want to see the timing of it, you really have to, RAM preview it. Alright, so next I want to talk about layer parenting. This is something that, another thing you probably know about. If not, maybe this is more of a beginner thing, but I'll get into it anyway. So let's say you're working on a new superhero movie called Revengers, and it has all kinds of superheroes from different movies in it. And then you also have this cool metal texture, and you want to put the metal texture on the text. So there's basically an easy way to do that. If you have two layers, like so. Whoops, something actually kind of messed up. Well, actually, I'll fix this momentarily. And you put it above the layer, and switch this layer on top. If you change the mode to multiply mask, now you'll see that it actually, it applies specifically to that. But let's say in the background you have this weird artistic thing of lens flares or whatever you want to put in the background. You'll notice it's actually applying to everything. So what I'm talking about, layer parenting, I can parent this metal layer. Well, actually, I'm making the text a child of that metal layer. That way this metal layer is only multiplying, it's only using the mask thing on the text and nothing else. That way you can put whatever you want below without it messing up. So I'm going to undo that actually, because I noticed I might be using this in a moment. I think I messed up with the layers. Yeah, here's what I'm going to... So now we have a cool picture of James, eating donuts. And we want to put it as a poster on the wall. This is something some people don't really know about. I actually had to explain it to someone recently. They were using a different technique that was kind of a lot harder. So basically what you do, if you drag it on top to a new layer, if you set, by default all layers are on source alpha. So if you go over to here and click this little compositing mode button, change it to 3D source alpha, nothing really changes yet. However, when you now click on, actually I should probably give a comparison. On source alpha, if you click in this track motion button, it opens up this thing, and you can kind of move it around, but it's in 2D. But if we switch this to 3D, now hit track motion, now we have the option to rotate it, and we can scale it down, rotate it back a little bit. And this is how people get little heads up displays. And now this is a perfect box, but I could have actually I could have kind of cropped it into the shape of some kind of thing. I can put it back on his. He's got a poster of James, faded out a little bit so it kind of blends a little bit. And he's got a little poster of James as well. I'm not going to go too far into this. Next thing is the crop window. There's actually a few options in the right click thing. I'll just get right into this. So let's say we have this little scene of smoke coming by. He's walking through smoke. Smoke's awesome, but it's not enough smoke for you. You want more smoke. So you throw in some more smoke. This is just some stock footage of smoke. And actually I have this compositing mode set to screen. It's actually, if I were to solo this out, it's basically just smoke on front of a black screen. So set to screen, and now I have more smoke. But it's still not enough smoke for you. You want more smoke. So let's duplicate it again, put more smoke. But we don't want it to be in the exact same place. So if you go into the crop window, there's a really cool thing that I didn't realize for a while. If you right click on the crop window, there's all these different options. One of them that's pretty useful is flip horizontal. It just mirrors it to the other side. So now you'll see there's actually smoke on the left corner and there's smoke on the right corner. And if you want to be a little bit more realistic, you should probably kind of offset this a little bit so it's not the same thing. Another thing you can do within this window, let's say you kind of move things around by accident. It's like, whoops, I want to fix it. You can always just right click and do restore. It just brings it back to the beginning. I use that restore thing a lot actually. Just fixes it. Alright, so next thing I want to get into is the ordering of effects and stuff. So here we have this nice picture of Forge World, but it needs something. It needs a flying night flash. So I have a night flash here that's flying in the sky. And we want to apply some effects on him because he can't just be flying through the sky. He has to be flying through the sky in night vision mode. Uh-oh. You put on this night vision effect and it looks kind of weird. We masked him out really... I masked him out really nicely. I kind of put a little bit of feathering so it kind of blends. But the second you put the gradient map on, it's kind of messing with everything, and the edging is kind of weird, and it's kind of creating a shadow. One thing you can do that took me a massively long time to figure out, because it's not very intuitive, when you have this little effect here, this little pan crop thing before, you can actually move that around, and you can put it behind it, and now you see now it's not ruining the scene, and it looks way better on the edging. Basically what this means, it makes perfectly sense, I just didn't think about it. Basically what this means is, you know, first we're going to apply the gradient map to, actually let me take off the mask for a second so you can see. First we're going to gradient map the scene up, then we're going to mask it, rather than, you know, masking him out and then gradient mapping over it. So you can use that to fix masking stuff a lot. I actually noticed that having problems. So here's another little just kind of demonstration of not just the special effects, having effects ordering matters. So let's say, you know, you have this little shot and you want to kind of color correct it and give it some kind of more cinematic look, and then you always got to throw a good old starburst on it, just get some little lens flares everywhere, 'cause who doesn't love lens flares? And then you want to put some rays coming out of that thing, just rays shining out. Shing. Basically the order of effects really matters, because let's say if I put rays before starburst, now it's going to be trying to create little lens flares off of the rays, and it kind of starts messing up. Or let's say, you know, I want to suddenly just throw in a newsprint for whatever reason. You know, right now it's newsprinting at the very end, so all that white space is perfectly white, whereas if I did newsprint and then a starburst, it's going to be just, you know, shining into everything and being kind of weird. Alright, we're getting near the end now. Volume envelopes. A lot of times I see people, let's say they have, you know, music playing and then someone says something right here, and they want the music to suddenly get quieter so you can hear the person. I see a lot of people that they'll, you know, cut it, and then, you know, just lower the volume so it kind of gets quieter, and then goes back up. I'll see other people that, you know, they'll kind of do this, which is smart, you know, they kind of fade it like that. But there's actually a way that's a little bit more, I mean, it might seem a little more complicated, but actually it's a little bit cleaner in the end. If you press the V button for volume, it'll open up these little lines, and basically right now it's set in the middle. If you double click, it creates a point. Double click to create more points. You can actually just lower this down, and, you know, lower these around, and now it's actually lowering the volume if I play this. What's there left to discuss? You know, it does that. And if you ever, one thing to keep in mind though, if you're doing this, careful not to, you know, lower the, whoops, delete this. Careful not to, you know, lower the volume and then just leave it like that, because then everything from then on is going to be really quiet. So what you always want to do, whenever you're done lowering it, make a new point. You can actually right click the point and do set to 0, and just brings it back up to 0. So that's the volume envelope. If you press P, you can do pan envelope, and basically it looks kind of similar, but of course instead of controlling volume, now it's controlling pan. So here I have like footsteps. They're just kind of, if I play these footsteps, but let's say we want the character to run from one side to the other, I can, you know, create some points and have it go like that. And again, notice how I create a point before and after, just to make sure I don't mess with anything else before or after this scene. Runs across the screen. I believe you can even you can do like a linear fade, so it's linear. Okay, and we're getting very close to the end now. Let me turn all these things off. Just press V and P again to close them. Let's say somebody sends you lines that have some problem like this. I'm just going to play this. I just recorded this for example. Here's a line in stereo, however it only has one track. I sound really bored. Notice there's two layers, as in it's a stereo recording, but it's only coming through one earpiece. I don't know if you've ever heard those tutorials, if you're watching some kind of tutorial on, you know, some piece of software, and for some reason the person doing the tutorial only comes through one ear, and after a while your right ear gets really lonely or something because it's all coming through your left ear. You can actually fix this a few ways. If you right click it and go to channels, you can do combine. It just pops it down into one layer, or one channel. So now if I play it, here's a line in stereo, however now it's actually just coming through. It's coming right through the center. Another way you can actually do this, let's say it wasn't only coming through one side, it was just coming through one side more than the other. Or actually, well, let's just say you want to kind of fix it. I keep doing things before I'm explaining it. You can actually apply effect pan, and then you can just manually kind of pan it to wherever it's in the middle. But for this example, it makes more sense just to go to channels, combine them. And here's another thing that's really weird. I didn't realize for the longest time, I'm saying that most of these things because it's true. I didn't realize most of these things for the longest time. I didn't realize that there's actually a motion blur within Vegas. If you go to, it's really complicated to find. No one I know knows about it. If you go to View, Video Bus Track, which has nothing to do with like driving a bus, it's some other kind of bus track, then it opens up this weird little layer that's not a layer, and well, what do you do? If you right-click in it, insert an envelope, like what is all this terminology, and do motion, I don't even know what these other things are, motion blur amount. Now you have this new thing, kind of similar to those audio and video, or similar to the video envelopes, similar to the audio envelopes we're doing over there. Now if you double click to make points, you can like kind of raise up the motion blur amount to like, you can keep raising it up. Notice like, whoa, it's really starting to kind of fade motion blur in. I use this very subtly sometimes. One thing to note, this will increase your render time substantially during the scene for whatever reason. But because, I mean, think about it, what it's doing is, notice, there's like 1 Banshee, 2 Banshee, 3 Banshees, it made like 30 Banshees. It's going to literally take about 30 times as long to render this clip because of that. And I did it in Sub-Zero once to kind of simulate, if you're using slow motion, sometimes it can actually make the slow motion look even slower, and pretty cool sometimes. One thing to do, make sure if you use this to always, set to none, turn it back off, because if there's a little bit of motion blur throughout the whole movie, you're just going to be having a hard time when it comes to time to render. So then you can like turn the bus back off. We don't need to be bussed around. So the very last thing to mention is another kind of simple thing. I'm kind of ending it on a simple thing, but a very useful thing, is kind of navigating and scrolling around. So if you just scroll, it zooms in and out. I think it was Cone Combat 2 when I finally realized if you hold, I knew if you hold shift and scroll, it kind of scrolls forward and backwards in time. And it was during Cone Combat, fortunately during Cone Combat 2, I was working on the Cone Combat, or I was working on the Cone competition, and I was running out of time, because I had all these layers of cones, and it was really hard to keep like going up to this layer of cone, going down to this layer of cone. I figured out by accident, luckily during that time, if you hold control and scroll, you can move up and down through the layers. And that just saved immense amount of time going up. If once you start getting like 30 or 40 layers, like a typical Rots episode has about 60 so layers. And can you imagine just, going around here, because there's all the different video tracks and sounds. So you can, in conjunction with, you just kind of have your hand on like the shift and control button, just scroll in, get really good at, navigating and stuff. And once you master that down, you'll really kind of pick up speed with things. So that's about it. Those are 20 tips I had. I thought they'd help a few people out. As long as this just helps a few people out, I'll feel that this was worth it. If you don't have Sony Vegas, sorry that this was kind of a waste for you. But I mean, it doesn't hurt you. It's not like you had to watch this. If it does help you out, thank you. Thank you for being helped out. Anyway, yeah, that's it. Goodbye. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.